Good evening. My name is Beverly Walker, and I'm your host for tonight. And I want to welcome everyone to the Georgia Doty Comprehensive Health Report. And I am here with my two guests tonight. I have Lee Rusch sitting next to me, and Ed Boone. Lee is with Prevention Partnership, and Ed Boone is with Lurie Children's Hospital. And I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves so I don't mess it up. You can start, Lee.
So, yes, I'm Lee Rusch. I'm with Prevention Partnership, and I serve right now as the director of the West Side Heroin / Opioid Task Force, a group that was started in 2016 by Representative LaShawn Ford from the 8th District. And to my right,
I'm Ed Boone. I'm a community programs coordinator with Annie Roberts Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, where we oversee the state unintentional drug overdose reporting system. And what we do is we track the who, what, when, and where, and why related to violent deaths, opioid drug-related deaths, or suicide deaths in the state of Illinois. We are currently working with coroner's offices, state police crime labs in 17 counties across the state, where we have data extractors work with them to get the information from death reports, and we compile it and disseminate it back out into communities.
Okay, I want to say hello to Donna Doty, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Georgia Doty Comprehensive Community Outreach Program. And I also want to say hello to Miss Yolanda Givens, who is the original host for the show, who is out ill. Hopefully she'll be back soon. I'm really praying for that. So tonight we're going to be talking about the opioid deaths in the community and how this program has come together to give us a new outlook or give us some assistance on the West Side in terms of how we can do something different and maybe do something else in terms of reaching those gaps, filling those gaps in service and providing some other services. So, you say this program was started up by LaShawn Ford and State Representative LaShawn Ford in 2016, and he came to Prevention Partnership in 2019 and asked you all to take over.
right.
Okay, Prevention Partnership is a great program. I've worked for them as a consultant for many years. So tell me, what is it that you all are doing? What's your mission?
Well, the number one mission is to stop the deaths due to overdose on Chicago's West Side. Ed can talk to kind of the dynamics of that, but in general, the West Side of Chicago has the highest rates of overdoses due to opioids, heroin, fentanyl, those other types of opioids, and also the largest amount of deaths due to overdoses in Chicago and also statewide.
Okay.
And so the focus is that Rep. Ford had is to really, first and foremost, stem the tide of all these deaths. And working from that, really building the system or continuing to build a system that responds across the continuum of care, from prevention to intervention to outreach to treatment and aftercare and continued recovery.
Okay. Yeah, when I first heard about it, I read it in the Austin Voice newspaper, and I immediately picked up the phone and said, "Hey, this is something I need to be involved in."
And you got involved.
I called Al and said, "Look, I need to be involved in this. I'm not one of those people that want to sit and just know about something. I want to be involved in it." And so I think you're doing a really, really good job. So just tell me, what is it that what's the layout? What's the plan?
Well, again, the number one plan is to save lives. So we want to make sure that there's more training on the west side in overdose education, how to identify an overdose, how to respond to it by giving naloxone, which is an antidote to the opioids. It can actually pull a person back from an overdose where they're not breathing within about a minute or two. Okay. It's also known as Narcan, which is a nasal spray.
Right.
The naloxone, the predominant amount of naloxone out there is through an injectable form. Both work the same way. Naloxone does not work on any other drug but opioids. And if a person's maybe having a heart attack or just drank too much alcohol or used some other drug, it will not affect it, but it will also not add to it. Naloxone will not cause any more problems.
So it won't cause any damage if a person if a person gives it to them and they're not having an overdose, it won't cause any other damage.
Exactly. So there's only the upside to it.
Okay.
Okay. So we want to make sure that more folks are trained, whether it's folks that work in an organization, whether it's community residents, whether it's people from a block club. We also have people going out to where the drugs are being sold and used to give that to folks so they're not dying immediately once upon using that. We also want to identify where there's new areas, and we're working closely with Sudors and Lurie to really help identify some of those spots, and Ed will talk a little bit more about those hot spots. We also have a drug take-back campaign because many of the drugs that maybe young people do or even folks within a family, they're getting them from medicine chests, from expired or drugs that aren't being used anymore by other family members, and teaching family members how to dispose of those drugs either by going to Walgreens or other places or using a kit to deactivate the drugs.
Okay, because I know I get a lot of information from the Office of Prevention Partnership about the drug take-back program, and I am the chair for the Westside Health Advocates Regional Planning Coalition. And I make sure that the people in my group get that information so that they can pass it on to the other people in their programs, other providers, so that they can make sure people in the community and their clients get that information. And a lot of times we leave medicine in our medicine cabinets for years.
Right.
We just don't take it out, you know. I mean, and some of that medication can cause harm if some of the other younger children get to it, or even if some adult get to it. Because if you're trying to take an aspirin, or you're trying to take some other pain pill, and it may look the same as something else.
Correct.
And you may not, the label could be done wiped off of it or something, you know, and you're not paying any attention to it. You could be done took the wrong kind of medication.
Exactly. Let's just mention, too, the other pieces of the task force efforts are policy, and there's individuals and organizations involved in the task force that work closely with the elected officials to identify opportunities to improve or draft legislation that furthers the cause. For instance, LaShawn Ford has been working with some of the groups, advocate groups, on House Bill 3789, which expands the reach of the Good Samaritan law. The Good Samaritan law basically says if you administer naloxone to somebody, there's no liability for you.
No liability.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the expansion of this, and this is still in a draft form, is to extend that to people who may be on parole or probation. It allows them to be able to do that without fear of being arrested. For being in that area. So that's still in process, and we hope that'll work. And the other piece of it is to work with treatment providers to make sure that they have the adequate staff funding and support to be able to deal with folks who have been revived or on the street and kind of want to recover, that there's access to them, enough access, enough beds, et cetera.
Yeah, because I know a lot of times police officers are saying there's not enough treatment programs when they encounter people on the street that need treatment programs. So that makes it more accessible to get a person into treatment. So that's important as well. I mean, it doesn't make sense to do something on one end and have the door closed on the other end, and they can't have access to the treatment. Ed, tell us about your portion of what you do at Children's Lurie.
Well, as I say, we capture data, and that's what we do. And we also do it in the form of heat maps, creating heat maps, whether it's drug-related or violent deaths. We can create these heat maps that show high concentration of deaths, whether it's from drugs or gun violence in a particular area.
Now, and we hear a lot about heat maps all the time. Can tell us what a heat map is, because our viewers may not know what a heat map is. If you have one, we could put it on overhead so we can show the community.
I do have one. A heat map basically highlights an area where there's a high concentration of, if it's drugs or violence or whatever it is that's taking place. It highlights it and it shows it in a red coloring or a yellow, and it just illuminates it. And here is, not sure if...
You put it here.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to show you this heat map that he has here.
And the heat map I'm showing currently is a heat map of West Side communities.
Okay, let's see. This works. Here it is. And this is the heated area right in here?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so you want to explain this, Ed?
Yes. These are basically the communities here. This is the communities of Humboldt Park, Austin, and some of West Garfield Park. And it basically shows the higher the red shows where there's a very high concentration
This is the red area in here.
Yes, a high concentration of drug use. And
So over in here, it's not as red.
No, it's not as red, but there's still a problem there because it's illuminated in the orange or red type. The only areas where you may have no drug use or it would be blank, it would be highlighted in the blue area,
This
such
area
as
here?
this. Yes.
Okay.
Even the light colored yellow areas here highlight heavy drug use areas
Oh, okay.
here. So it's actually spread out, but it's high intense in this area here.
Okay, so now I'm not real sure if they can see it that well. It says opioid-related unintentional drug overdose deaths, west side of Chicago. And this is from July 2017 to June 2018.
Yes, and just to talk about that a bit, from June 2017 to July 2018, there were 202 overdose deaths in 5 communities on the west side. We're talking about North Lawndale, Humboldt Park, West Garfield.
You have another
Yes,
map?
yes. And I'll show you what some of the numbers look like in those various communities.
The other way.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, so now,
These are the 5 communities where you've had 202 overdose deaths from 2017 to 2018. The highest concentration of those deaths have occurred in West Garfield and Humboldt Park. And Humboldt Park encompasses West Humboldt Park also, which is west of Kedzie. 202 deaths, overdose deaths. Of those 202 overdose deaths, there were 164 had fentanyl, they were laced with fentanyl, or a combination of heroin or cocaine. And it could be a combination of any of the two. 124 were laced with heroin, 87 were laced with cocaine.
so that's why we had, with the higher concentration of fentanyl, that's why we were having so many deaths
Yes.
in those areas.
Yes, it's the mixture, the combining
Combined.
combining the drugs.
And fentanyl is about 100 times more powerful
More
than
powerful
heroin.
than
Than the
heroin,
heroin,
right.
yes. Mhm. And as we, take a deeper look, we saw that of the 202 overdose deaths, there were 158 were from males. There were 44 females.
So now we got race, age.
Age. When we think about the age, most deaths from the of the 202 deaths were between the ages of 35 and 44. Second in line was the 45 to 54 age group. So anywhere from age 25 to 54, there are very high uses of fentanyl, heroin, or cocaine. There were small numbers at age 14. There were something like 5, and age 55 plus, there were 7.
Well, I understand 55 up, I guess. But then when you look at
14.
14, age
It's unbelievable.
14 and under,
Right.
you're wondering
It's-
what's
right.
happening
It's
there.
hard to imagine that a 14 or 15-year-old would be using drugs of that type.
Well, but a lot of things happen.
Yes, a lot of
A
things
lot of
happen.
things are happening.
Could be a lot of things happening. It could be a death in the family or anything that drives a youth that young to drugs. It could be experimenting,
Yeah.
starting out with alcohol, marijuana, and then just gradually moving forward. And it could be the company that they keep.
Right.
Some young people, a lot of young people in our communities hang out with adults.
Yeah.
And a lot of times those adults are not steering them in the right direction.
Yeah, and there's no telling what's happening in the house.
Yes. Let me just say that on the west side, we have a serious problem with single room occupancy units on the west side. There are 2 particular single room SROs is what they're called, that house single individuals.
Right.
We have 2 of them on the west side that have had 20 deaths in these 2 buildings in the 5-year period. 20 in 2 single hotels.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting. So, do you have, and you said that both of those facilities are on the west side?
Both are on the west side. I'll go out and say one is on Washington.
Excuse me, we have a caller. Caller, you have a question or a comment?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, sir. Can you hear me?
can you talk a little louder?
Okay, yes. Is there an ethnic breakdown, a percentage?
Yes, we do have an ethnic breakdown.
Thank you.
breakdown on percentage of the high rate of drug use?
Great question. Great question. As we talked earlier, from July 2017 to June of 2018, of the 202 deaths that we mentioned earlier, there were 103 of them were African Americans, 42 were of Caucasian or European descent, and 25 Hispanic, 32 were others. Could be Asian or of a mixed race.
So with this program being on the west side, it clearly shows that it is affecting the African American community the most. And the next category would be white, which is predominantly what's in that area, in that community area.
So, look at that for a minute. With the 103 deaths being of African American descent, and we know that those communities that we mentioned are
Predominantly
African American. So the 42 white deaths that have occurred were probably transit individuals coming on
right.
the heroin highway, which is 290,
Yeah.
stopping off to get drugs. Some had maybe used their drugs right there in the community.
In the community, yeah.
And have died right there
Right
in the
there.
community. So we recorded their death in that community, not where their residence is.
Exactly.
Had they taken
Right.
the drug back to their community and used it and overdosed there, we would have tracked that death back to Naperville or
Right.
somewhere back in their
Right, where
community.
they
But
did.
because it happened here, we tracked it and we collected the data for being here.
It's like being in prison. When you go to prison someplace else, and that's where they get that number for the census. Okay, thank you, caller. But it's interesting. So, what's the plan for this? Do you all have a plan? I mean, what's the plan for the West Side Heroin Opioid Task Force to combat some of this?
Well, as I mentioned, there's a number of strategies that are being used. But I think one of the primary pieces is increasing the amount of people who are trained and have access to naloxone in the injectable form or Narcan in the nasal spray. We also want to educate people to know that if they're on Medicaid, they can go to Walgreens or in other pharmacies and get
Get those kits.
those kits for free.
So,
It's a-
Georgia Doty Comprehensive Health Program, Community Outreach Program, works with people in the community. So, can they have a training done at their program?
Mr. Kent, I'm going to move this. Ed was very instrumental in really driving home the fact that we need to reach out to people across the Austin community and the other communities and enroll them and get them involved in training. And training can come in a number of different ways.
Right.
We're asking for agencies or individuals to fill out a form for us to recognize that they need some training and to pass it forward to us. Some of our agencies out there are dedicated to training folks. We have the Chicago Recovering Communities Coalition that's located at 501 North Central.
That's that.
Yep, that we have some, all these folks here are training people in some form or fashion.
Okay.
Some of them are training their clients. They may be treatment programs, and they're training their clients while they're in treatment, or when they leave treatment, they're giving them doses of this. Some are holding classes in their shops.
Okay.
Some are doing street outreach, where they're doing the training on the street. Probably the leader in getting information and naloxone out to the communities across Chicago and the metropolitan area is Chicago Recovery Alliance. They're the ones who primarily get access to be able to give the injectable form out. I think they gave about 110,000 doses out in 2018, and they're looking, because of the
Oh, okay.
demand, doing that more. But more and more organizations are becoming what the state designates as a drug overdose prevention program, meaning that they can have stocks of the naloxone or
Naloxone.
Narcan to be distributed through their trainings as well.
Okay. And so I understand you all are also working with the Chicago Department of Public Health as well?
Right, they're one of the sources of naloxone and also of good information, flyers, et cetera. They are
Okay.
very specific about how naloxone is used, what it can be used for, because we want to make sure that we're overcoming any fears about getting involved and also overcoming any stigma.
Okay.
But just to answer your question specifically about any organizations or partners that would like to receive training, we're working with a number of partners that can facilitate trainings, that can actually come out to a location to provide training, or we have training at a couple of sites on the west side. I'll let Lee, if you want to talk about those trainings.
Okay, so now we're actually winding down. We have like 5 minutes.
Yep.
This is probably going to turn into like 3 minutes. We have another caller. Caller, you have a question or a comment? Caller, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Are the narco pens free, and where can you purchase or get them?
Say that again.
She wanted to know, are they free and where can she get
The
one?
kits.
Obtain one, yes.
You can get it at Walgreens.
If you're on Medicaid, there's no charge for it.
Or she just come in for a training.
Or come in for a training.
And receive it free, yeah.
Right. There's a couple places in the Austin community that are providing training in the next couple weeks.
I'm going to go to overhead, and you will be able to see the information for the Narcan, where you can get some of the training.
This is Life-Changing Community Outreach. They're located at 5900 West North Avenue. They're providing a training this Saturday from 11 to 1 p.m. and also another one on the 21st of December, 11 to 1
To
p.m.
1.
And also Chicago Recovery Community Coalition is providing a training from 12 to 2 on December 13th, 2019.
They're also having one on November 22nd.
Yeah, the 22nd as well.
From 12 to 2.
Right, and this is at 501 North Central Avenue.
And you can receive 2 free kits if you attend the training.
Right, the injectable type. You can also call any of these numbers that we have, and you can call, can we give some numbers out?
Well, here's a number on here, 773-417-2045. And I can make sure that the Georgia Doty program has the information on how they can refer a person to the West Side Heroin Opioid Task Force. That's a mouthful. To make sure that they can pass that information along. If any of the other people and any of the other programs that are associated with Georgia Doty want additional information on this, I will make sure that you have that information and you can pass it along as well to them. Lee, Ed, I want you all to, in the next 2 minutes, tell us what you want the public to know before we wrap up and go off air.
Well, I would say that there's a big need for assistance out there. There are a lot of individuals that are suffering, that are dealing with a lot of personal things in their lives, and they need your help. Reach out to them. Don't turn them away. It could be any number of things that put them in the situations that they're in, and it could be you next month, a year from now. We never know what situation God has planned for us. So just to reach out and help someone else. Just reach out and help someone else.
Right.
I can say.
Lee?
This is giving somebody naloxone is basically a one-step way to save a life. A chain of events doesn't have to happen. You find somebody who's overdosing and you can give them naloxone and you will save a life. So every day, Ed and I wake up, we realize that we're involved in an effort that directly saves lives. And there's something really, great about that. So the main thing is we want to make sure that people get trained, they know how to get naloxone, continue to get training. I think you're probably trained 20 times. You've been trained 20 times.
Yeah.
I got my first training standing next to Legler Library. Julie Skokna from Thresholds trained me, and my partner and a guy from the community that usually copped in that spot, but he felt God had ordained him to be there at that time to get it. Chicago Recovery Alliance does a training of trainers.
Yeah.
So it also teaches you a little bit about the context that we're working in called harm reduction.
And I think they're having one December 5th, 3rd.
They're actually having one Thursday down at the Chicago Urban League too at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
But anyway, I think that through the task force and through the relationships we built, we found a lot of folks that want to work with us.
All right, so I just want to say thank you to the public who has been watching us over these 25 minutes, and see you next week.